Good evening and welcome to Officer and Board Essentials. We are so excited to share some time with you. Let's kick things off with a virtual who's who. Jason, if you could do the next slide and launch our poll. So while you get a chance to introduce yourselves, I'd like to introduce you to your training team. So my name is Kara Jenkins. I am a former local unit PTA treasurer and president, and I am the current president for Fairfax County Council. Joining me tonight is Maureen McNulty, a former local unit PTA president and current president for Alexandria City Council. Also joining us with technical support is Debbie Kilpatrick and Jason Morgan, NOVA district officers. I hope everyone got a chance to vote. I am really excited to see what our results are. I feel like I should sing the Jeopardy theme song. Oh my goodness, we have so many people that are new to PTA and need help. You are in the right place. Okay, so we're gonna move on to our next slide. So I hope that regardless of where you are in your PTA journey, that you do learn something today, and considering all the new people, I think we've got that covered. So the truth, it will be extremely difficult to cover everything that you need to know in less than an hour. Because of the sheer volume of information that we have to share with you tonight, we went ahead and we created a notes document that contains all the critical pieces of information for tonight. This means that you can sit back, relax, and be in receive-only mode. You don't have to worry about taking your own notes. So here's what you're going to learn today. So first, you're going to understand what it means to PTA. We'll ask you to look within and consider what kind of leader do you want to be? And then after understanding this, we will take a closer look at some of the specific duties and skills that you need to be successful. And finally, we will think about how we can smoothly pass the torch to our successors. Next slide, please. Okay, so before we can dive into the board and officer essentials, it's really important to understand who we are and why we are here. Great way to get a handle on this is through the simple yet so important act of reading and understanding our mission statement. Let's take a quick pause and I'm going to read it aloud to you. PTA's mission is to make every child's potential a reality by engaging and empowering families and communities to advocate for all children. What do you notice? What words are popping out to you? What words do you think might be missing? So when I look at the mission statement, I see every child. I notice the words engaging and empowering. I notice the words community and advocate. You know what words I don't see? Money, fundraising, bake sales. Think about that today as we go through our training. So we encourage you to really become intimately familiar with this, with our mission statement, because this drives your work. This will drive your meetings, and it can drive difficult decisions that either you or your membership might have to make. Simply put, it is the why we are here. And personally, I like to read our mission statement aloud at the end or at the start of every single meeting. So now we know why we're here. So what do we do with this mission, and who are we? Well, PTA people know this truth. Kids do better when parents get involved. Who is the PTA? Well, we're an organization more than 120 years strong. We work towards bettering the lives of every children in education, health, and safety. Today, we are a network of more than 4 million members, comprising of families, students, teachers, administrators, and business community leaders, all devoted to the educational success of children and the promotion of family engagement in schools. We are the largest and the oldest volunteer child advocacy organization in the nation, and we're the conscience of our country for children and youth issues. What does the PTA do? Well, through advocacy as well as family and community education, PTA has established programs and called for legislation that improves the lives of children. You can take a look at our slide to see some of the accomplishments and our priorities. So we can see that historically the PTA has been involved in some pretty cool legislation. And right now we'd like to share some of the stuff that Virginia PTA has been advocating for as a direct result of COVID-19. So last year, Virginia PTA watched 56 bills. They took a position on 49 of them and had 35 with positive outcomes, focusing on funding, broadband, mental health, support staff, childcare, school nutrition, and special education. We had 42 constituent connection meetings with legislators, and we sent over 180 emails. You can take a look at our notes document to see the direct impact of these priorities. And you can learn more how you can take action by visiting the link provided on the slide. Okay, so now we know why we are here. We know that we are the largest and the oldest child advocacy organization in the nation, more than 4 million members strong. Now it's important to understand we didn't do it alone. The PTA difference. So the PTA is different from other parent groups because when you join your school's PTA, you're part of a much larger network, a part of a much larger community, one that includes not only your school, but it also includes your school district, your state, even national PTA. And even more cool than that, when you sign up to be a PTA leader, you are never, ever alone. There is a whole built-in network of support that is here to see you succeed. If you are seeking input, feedback, advice, you have the ability to utilize our online resources on the council, the district, the state, or even the national level. You can also speak directly. You can talk to me, you can talk to Maureen, you can talk to our NOVA district leaders. Because sometimes a phone call and a conversation is more helpful than a website. So if you learn just one thing today, know that you are not alone. You are supported by experienced PTA leaders who will lift you up. They will be your cheerleader when needed. They'll provide you resources, clarification, knowledge, and we strongly desire to see you and your PTA succeed. Today's training won't give you all the answers, but it is the first step on your journey to knowing that you can find the answers. Everything will be all right. So now we understand PTA. We know the who, the why, and the what. So now it's time to look inward. Why are you here? What does it mean to you to be a PTA officer or a board member? When people describe your leadership, what words would you like them to use? You know, I recently met with a group of current and past PTA presidents, and we had a long discussion and almost a debate as to what word an officer role should look like. Should we use the word leader? Should we use the word manager, coach, teacher? We decided there's not really one best word. There's just a best word for each person and for each situation. I personally have always subscribed to the idea of servant leadership. But what word resonates with you? At this point, I'd like to launch our second poll to see what you think a leader should look like. So what does it mean to be a PTA board member? Are you a servant leader? Are you a manager? A coach? A commander? Are you inspirational? All right, I am looking forward to seeing what our answers are. Servant leader, awesome. Some coach, there's definitely a lot of coaching happening, and inspirational. We always want to be inspiring. We don't want to be feared. All right.
Okay. Well, thank you, Kara. I'm going to take over for a few minutes and try and fill those very large footsteps that Kara created. You're so calming, Kara. Like I can tell that you were a teacher. Um, well, I'm glad we didn't have any commanders in the group. That makes me feel a little comforted because that's a tough role to take for the PTA board. So I'm going to move into talking about our board, which is the meat of our presentation, what you need to know about being a PTA officer and a board member, because you're part of a team as being a PTA president, and it's important to work with this team effectively because they will make or break your success this year. So we've gathered this information into 5 major categories, and we'll take a closer look at each of these categories. So we're going to start with teamwork. Next slide. So you may be the leader, coach, commander, or whatever term you choose to identify with, but you lead your team. Effective leadership involves getting to know your team. So here's some things to think about. How do your team members prefer to be communicated with? Is it through email? Is it texting? A phone call? Just to give you an example, what we did this year was we set up our executive board for our council. We set up a text thread over the summer. And as the year started to heat up and back to school, all the back to school things started getting into the year, we realized that texting was just getting completely out of hand because not all of us had an iPhone. Some folks had an Android, and anytime someone liked a statement, then the whole statement would appear, and it was just very, very difficult to read through if you were in a meeting for an hour and there was a long text thread. So one of our board members proposed the idea of Slack. And I had never worked with Slack. It's an app that you can use. You can also do it on your desktop. And it's really been a wonderful way for all of us to communicate. And we divide it into different channels so that we can keep everything by subject. So talk to your board members and see what is the most effective way to communicate, because communicating really is going to be 90% of the work this year. And if you all can get together in a consensus on how that's going to work best, you really will be in a much better place. What are the professional or other volunteer, family, and personal obligations of your board members? Are some of them, we have a board member who works at the CIA. So she's not able to take her phone into the building during working hours. So I know that, and she and I end up doing a lot of just phone calls in the evenings. She's our advocacy chair because the phone is too difficult for her and personal email is just not possible at work. So really kind of figuring out the nuances of all of your board members is really helpful. Also figuring out what everyone is, their passion, okay, their strengths. Match those passion and strengths to the proper role in your PTA board. And I imagine you've already done that because hopefully those folks have matched up their backgrounds to the positions they've signed up for. But sometimes, it does take a couple months to figure out where people really fit best. And sometimes there's an overlap. And that's the great thing about teamwork is that everyone kind of pitches in and knows their strengths and weaknesses. I know that I'm not very good at graphic design, I'm terrible. But we have a person on our board who is wonderful. And thankfully she's our communications chair, so it worked out perfectly. But before her, I always reached out to someone else on our board whenever I needed to make a flyer, because that just is not my strength. So next slide. So when you think of your school's PTA, you can divide your membership into 3 different groups. You've got your executive committee, your executive board, and your general membership. I always get confused between the committee and the board. So the executive committee is your elected officers and your principal. So that's part of, and your principal. While your executive board has all the individuals from this committee plus all the committee chairs. So the difference between your executive committee and your executive board is the inclusion of these committee chairs. And the executive committee members have a vote, whereas your executive board members do not when you are deciding executive business, okay? Your executive committee, which is, again, your voting officers and your principals, set the PTA goals, the programs, and the calendars. And you have the authority as the president to create a committee and appoint committee chairs. For some PTAs, their committee and their board are the same thing because they do not have committee chairs. And if that's the case, don't stress out because this is totally normal. Let me give you an example. Last year in our council, we decided that we wanted to have a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. That was not part of our regular board. It had never been a board. And after all of the racial equity conversations we had last year, we felt that it was really important to have a DEI presence. So our president appointed a DEI chair. And so that person became part of our executive board. Now, if we wanted to have that person become part of the executive committee, we would have to amend our bylaws because that would be a voting role. And we'll get into that in a little bit later. Finally, you have your general membership. We are a membership-based organization. This means that our general membership are very critical and powerful. Their voice matters. Your general membership includes every dues-paying member, including officers. Each member holds equal weight and has one vote. Your general membership will do the following. They approve the budget and any budget amendments, which is really important. And you need to look at your bylaws to see what the dollar range is for modifying that budget. It differs from, I believe, from bylaws to bylaws, but for like our executive council, our council, any change in the budget for $300 has to go back into a membership vote. And I imagine we'll be talking about in the next session, so I won't get into that, but just to give you an idea. The membership also adopts the annual financial review, which happens in the summer. So that's typically a vote in the first meeting. Adopting the bylaws, electing the officers, which hopefully has already happened and you won't have to worry about that until May. And electing your nominating committee, which typically happens in March. One thing to note, before you or your executive board takes a position on behalf of your PTA, it is essential that you get a consensus or a membership vote approval to take this position. This includes things like providing testimony at an official meeting, or speaking to the principal, or providing written or public comments to your school board. You cannot speak for your members without listening to or polling them first. I'll give you another example. Last year, with all the reopening discussions, it was very fraught time. And we had a PTA that decided that they were going to take a very hard line on the reopening discussions. And without surveying their membership, they provided written and or verbal commentary or spoken commentary at our school board meeting, really advocating for immediate school reopening. And as you can imagine, that didn't sit well with their general membership and actually caused a lot of discord going forward and a lot of loss of trust in the membership. And it was pretty hard to recover from that during the school year. So finally, anytime your membership does business, we require a quorum, which is simply the minimum number of members required to take action on behalf of your membership. Your quorum member is listed in your bylaws. It is usually 10, but absolutely check. Next slide. So knowledge is power. With that, we have wrapped up the teamwork, making the dream work portion. Now let's get to learning because knowledge is power. Over the next few slides, we are going to go more in depth to understand what bylaws are, standing rules, and good standing, all the exciting stuff of being part of a PTA. I did want to briefly point out that there are additional ways to gain knowledge. So training through NOVA and Virginia PTA is an excellent resource, and we have like some amazing state leadership here who really do their best to keep us engaged in our learning continuous. Meet with your predecessors, get to know other PTAs in your district or your neighborhood. Join the Facebook group, which is called PTA Local Leaders. It's a really great resource. If you have any questions, you can post it on this Facebook page and you will probably get 20 or 30 responses throughout the US, and it's really interesting to see how other districts operate. And then find yourself a PTA mentor. You know, that's really important. I have someone that I go to for the PTA pep talks that we all need throughout the year. Okay, so next slide. So bylaws. We know that bylaws can be intimidating, but please read them. They kind of operate as your PTA unit's Bible while conducting business. And don't wait until you need something from them. Like, read them maybe this weekend. They aren't that bad. They're pretty readable, and it's really a good way to understand how to conduct business so you don't get into any trouble along the way. Bylaws provide a written contract that details your unit's purpose, the policies, and structure. They are the single most important legal document of a PTA unit, establishing and protecting the rights of the membership and giving you the authority to operate as a national business. Your local unit bylaws link your association to the Virginia PTA and also to the national PTA. New this year and going forward, Virginia PTA has created local unit uniform bylaws. This means your PTA will now annually submit a one-page organization structure each year detailing things like your officers and how many meetings you will have. You will also notice that this slide references 501c3, and you might be wondering what that is. Well, guess what? That is in the next training, so stay tuned for that. I also would like to point out that bylaws need to be updated every 5 years, and that is done through your general membership. And if you have any questions, you can talk to Debbie or any of us, and also check out the website. And any modification to the bylaws require approval of the Virginia PTA, and that is all on the Virginia PTA website. Next slide.
Before we
It's okay, Jason. I'll cover it. So we had a major bylaws change this year. We have uniform bylaws. That means they're not due every 5 years. That means
we need more training. So
they're done forever and ever and ever. So instead of doing the bylaws revision every 5 years, all you have to do is each year submit a form saying what officer positions you have, how many meetings you have. It is easy peasy, beautiful cover girl.
So great. Well, thank you for telling me. Yes, that portion of the training.
So a lot of people have missed it. So with that, we're going to launch our next poll. Have you read your bylaws?
Kara,
our bylaws.
Before we move on, just well, yeah, the next poll will be important, but just a comment we've got from an audience member, which is perhaps needs to be brought up, which is some of the things that were discussed, like how much the executive committee, how much can be changed from the how much of a deviation you can have from the budget. Some of those things are now in the uniform bylaws, and they may differ from what you had previously approved. So make sure to look at the uniform ones, not the old ones.
And it's all on that website, so you are covered. So we want to know, are bylaws your friends? Do you snuggle with them at night? Are you strangers? You've never heard of the bylaws before now? Are you acquaintances? Maybe you've looked to find a specific piece of information. Are you friends? You've read your bylaws at least one time? Or are you best friends? Have you read them thoroughly and you reference them often? So I'm wondering, since so many of you guys are brand new to PTA, if you even have heard of bylaws before now. Oh my goodness. I am actually really impressed with this. Considering how many of you are new, that only a few of you are strangers, that is fantastic. I encourage you, if you've read your old bylaws, make sure that you're reading the new uniform template. So we're going to move on to standing rules. So if bylaws are your friends, then standing rules are your superpower. Standing rules are kind of like classroom rules. They explain the details of how your board operates. They can serve as a guide. They can assist with the orientation of new board members. They can ensure successful transitions, and they can even help avoid or facilitate conflict. The most important thing to remember is that bylaws cannot, or I'm sorry, that standing rules cannot contradict your bylaws. So the bylaws, as we kind of just mentioned, are set by Virginia PTA. The standing rules are how you interpret those bylaws. Okay, what does that mean, really? So I'm going to give you a few examples. Your bylaws will state how many general membership meetings you will have each year. Your standing rules could then say when, where, and what time those meetings are. They're always the first Wednesday at 7 o'clock, right? Your bylaws will talk about how you can remove an officer, but they don't tell you why. So your standing rules can say, well, missing 3 meetings in a row without notice and without letting us know why, that can be grounds for us to dismiss you as an officer. So bylaws are your friends, standing rules are your superpower. If you don't have standing rules, I encourage you to consider adding them to your toolbox, because communicating them to your team can help you avoid conflict. For example, if there's no expectation that officers attend meetings, there's probably going to be conflict if you have an officer that doesn't attend a meeting. But if you have standing rules that say, hey, you're an officer, you're expected to be here, and when you're not, these are the consequences. It's not personal, it's just the standing rules. So yes, they can help you avoid conflict, they can help you allow your PTA to run smoothly, and they can most certainly assist with a smooth transition from this board to the next board. So we're going to talk about good standing. So you want to be the PTA leader that either keeps or gets your unit in good standing. Good standing, it's a fun word, but it's actually a legal requirement. It is the legal requirement to maintain your tax-exempt status and your affiliation with Virginia PTA. Good standing allows you standards of affiliation or legal sufficiency to operate as a nonprofit in the Commonwealth of Virginia. All board members, not just the treasurer, have fiduciary responsibility for the financial position of the PTA. We're going to talk about that word in a minute. It really means it's how you keep your PTA, keep it in its 501c3 status. So to be in good standing, you're going to want to check that we have contact information for your executive board, that you have filed your annual financial review, that we have your annual tax filing or 990, that we have your membership list, that we have your membership dues. Whew. So Virginia PTA has streamlined all of these processes using a centralized system to store and submit this through MemberHub. But let's just pause and breathe. If all of those terms I just threw out, like dues submission, IRS 990, financial review, if you're sweating and you're wondering what all those words mean, just breathe. All of that information is going to go into the best detail imaginable in the next session. So stay tuned for the treasurer seminar to learn about all those fun phrases I just used. But we're going to talk about MemberHub. So as I mentioned, all those compliance documents that had you break out in hives, all of that's going to go through to MemberHub. But there's so many more things, right? So MemberHub is an online relationship management tool. It's designed to help you run your PTA, to connect your families, and support the submission of all of those fun annual compliance documents. So you can read the slide here to find out all the really fun things that you can do with MemberHub. But what's really cool is that Virginia PTA has provided this free for all local units to use. So you definitely want to take advantage of this. It's a great and wonderful tool. So 2 slides ago, I mentioned the words fiduciary duty, right? So all board members, not just treasurers, have a fiduciary responsibility for the financial position of the PTA. What is fiduciary duty? So, duty of care. Simply put, you participate and you collaborate to advance our mission and to safeguard the financial assets of the PTA. Duty of loyalty. The PTA comes first. It comes before advancing your own personal agenda, and you need to make sure that you disclose any conflicts of interest, and if needed to, recuse yourself from voting. And the duty of obedience, follow your bylaws. You want to remain a guardian of the brand and of our mission. So taking those first steps. So far this year, you've been elected. You started working with your fellow officers, your principal, your committee chairs, and you're going to adopt your budget and you're going to plan out your calendar year. So if you haven't set goals yet as a PTA, take a moment to stop and think. What are your PTA's previous challenges or successes? And then think about what your community needs this year. It might be different than it was in the past, right? You also might want to consider polling your membership to get an idea of how they feel. What kinds of things do they think the PTA should be focused on? Examples of goals might include community connections, assistance with food insecurities, prioritizing mental health for your staff, your students, and your families. It could be anything, really. So once you have a goal or two, then you'll want to coordinate events or activities that support this goal. Then you're going to want to make sure that it aligns with your budget. So really, you shouldn't be doing any work until you figure out what is our purpose this year. Set your goals. Okay, so now you've met with your team. You've read your bylaws, you've read your standing rules, you've identified your PTA's priorities, and you're making sure that your goals, that your programs and events support your goals and your community. So now it's time to administer the business of the PTA to make sure all your ducks are in a row. Things to think about include effective meeting management, considering your financial and legal obligations, and ensuring the successful integration of advocacy in your PTA. Have you ever attended a meeting, PTA or otherwise, that went off topic? People spoke over one another, or it lasted way too long, or all three of those things? Please, please, please don't let that happen to your PTA this year. Use tools like set agendas, like parliamentary procedure or Robert's Rules of Order, to help you support efficient meeting management. Having one person in charge can help, and your bylaws grant the president the authority to schedule meetings, set the agenda, and preside over the meeting. It is also their responsibility to control or manage the meeting. On this slide, there are a couple of links that you can visit that will give you helpful tips on how to run effective meetings using Robert's Rules of Order. So another duck to keep in a row is your financials. No passing money under the table, right guys? Transparency of your membership's money is critical. Your membership's money, not your treasurer's money, not your principal's money, not your money, the membership's money. So your best practices, and probably your insurance, requires the following: that monthly the bank account reconciliation is being compared to the treasurer's report, and it's being looked at by somebody who's not already in charge of the money. The cash is counted by two people. The deposits are made the same day. No taking home a duffel bag of cash and putting it in your closet and forgetting about it for 2 weeks. We need to go to the bank. We want to make sure the checks are signed by two people, that we have documentation to sign those checks, and that we're not signing a blank check ever, 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 ever. I don't care if you're best friends with the treasurer. Do not sign a blank check. And finally, you want to make sure that your budget is updated monthly with accurate expenses and income, and know that the budget can be amended with your general membership's approval. So it's important to remember that the PTA is not just a group of parents doing whatever they want, but that there are legal obligations that need to be considered. I mentioned a few of these words some slides ago, but they include an annual financial review, making sure that we have insurance, making sure that we're filing our taxes, and even who's signing contracts. So again, to learn more about these things, stay tuned, and you'll learn all about it in the next session, Treasurer's Seminar. And I'm going to turn the floor over to Maureen.
Okay, we are going to be moving into advocacy. So we do have another poll for you to take. True or false? Here's a poll. Is the PTA a fundraising organization? Yes, we hold bake sales and gift wrap fundraisers all day, every day. No, we are an advocacy organization with some fundraising. And thirdly, I really don't know, and I'd like more info. Okay, great. I'm happy to see that response. I think we kind of prepped you for it. So let's talk about advocacy. Advocacy can seem like a big scary word, almost as scary as bylaws, but it really isn't. I encourage you to grow to love and utilize the word and everything it represents, because it's truly the heart of our work. We're not a fundraising organization. And do you want to be known for bake sales and gift wrap fundraisers? Or do you want to be the president who successfully convinced the principal and the school board to implement a change that positively impacts a child's education? I know my answer. So let's break it down. Advocacy is sharing a story or experience that your child, school, or community is dealing with and turning it into an action item or a request for change. Advocacy is as simple as stating a problem and the change that would be impactful. That change could be a local school board policy, funding or staffing formula, improved training, enhanced communication, and a second school crossing guard at your school. If you're looking to introduce advocacy in your PTA work, we've provided 10 ways to get started in the notes handout that will be provided to you. Next slide. Another good starting point for your advocacy is to look at the things you may be fundraising for and the challenges faced in your school community, and ask your membership to consider these 3 questions. Are we raising money for something that the school division should provide? Does the fact that we're paying for it create inequity among our school district? And what prohibits our students from being successful? If you answered yes to the first 2 questions, it's time to examine why your PTA is raising this money, instead of raising your voices to advocate for every school, community, and student in your school division. Next slide. So soft skills. Even if you're not acting on behalf of the PTA, sorry, my dog is making a lot of noise, you are still the PTA. Hopefully you see now that advocacy is the heart of our work. It is the how and it is the why. Let's switch gears again and think about the idea of soft skills. These are the things we don't always consider when accepting a volunteer leadership position. Please remember that you are the face of the PTA at your school. Be careful with the image you present on social media, in the school building, or even when you're running around town doing errands, because some people you don't even know will see you as the PTA. In addition, make sure that when you speak on behalf of the PTA that you've already gotten that buy-in from your general membership. As a PTA leader, you will be nurturing relationships and you will be cultivating the next generation of leaders. Relationships with and among your team, with your members, your principal, your school staff. Think about that and be approachable, respectful, and collaborative. The power of the PTA is our seat at the table. Be mindful of that in your work. You don't want to blow up relationships. You want to cultivate them. And positive working relationships with your team is critical to your PTA success. Without a PTA, you'll be doing all the work, or that work won't happen. So actively think about your communication skills. One thing I did when I was PTA president of our school unit was I would take every month, and I would use our social media to celebrate one of our volunteers. And I would have their photo, and I would talk about the good work they're doing, because it I think really helped establish a sense of celebration, recognition, and people were actually really grateful that their work was being recognized by everyone. And it also allowed people to see, oh wait, this person has a full-time job and they're still doing this work. Maybe I can do that next year. Maybe that's something that I can do. Communication with your team is important, but remember that general membership is part of your larger team too. Make sure you're communicating with them and you're actively engaging with your membership to determine priorities. And communication is really probably 90% of the job of an effective PTA is figuring out those venues and those platforms that connect with your parents. So are you using translated documents? Are you using platforms that your parents might be using? Are you trying to use a texting platform? Are you using cultural ambassadors in your PTA to help you bring in more members, or to communicate your priorities and your activities? And finally, prepare to manage yourself to manage conflict. Unfortunately, it probably will happen at some point this year, but think of it as a way of stimulating your personal growth. And it's what we do with a conflict that will shape it into a positive or negative experience. And always give yourself grace. You are a volunteer. I'm absolutely sure you have a busy home life, and at some point you're going to make a mistake, but forgive yourself and learn from it, and just move on. So next slide. Okay, so we're in the home stretch. Let's talk about transitions, and congratulations for making it this far. If you're starting your new position, you will want to ensure you receive the information we are discussing from your predecessor. But planning for next year's transition starts now. As you're compiling all your resources and planning out your school year, take the time to put it together in a nice, organized fashion for your successor. In fact, with every action you take this year, agendas for meetings, contracts, calendar, minutes, think about how you're going to pass this along to your successor. And because you want to provide them with a blueprint of what you did to help them plan for what they're going to do, and remind your board members to do the same. And don't forget to keep an eye on successorship, like now, because you will want to start grooming your future leaders for the work that they are potentially going to take on for next year. You don't want to wait until you need to put together a nomination slate. You want to start thinking about these people now and start plugging them into your sort of like personal Rolodex of potential leaders for next year. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we've come full circle. Here's our mission statement again. I really like Kara's idea of using this at the beginning of every meeting, because I think it really kind of it filters out the noise, because there is a lot of PTA noise, but we have to always remember it's about the kids and lifting up the kids and elevating their families and recognizing their fullest potential. So I hope that you remember this mission as you go forward in your work this year, and it inspires you. Okay, last slide, or next slide. So here's what we learned today. We've learned the basics of the PTA, who, what, why. We've learned about board basics, how important teamwork is. We've learned about your personal knowledge and how that empowers you in your work. How to take that first step. It can be intimidating, that first meeting, the first couple meetings. I will tell you, that the PTA work is a lot at first, and then it does get a little bit easier as you start to roll with it and as all the back to school craziness dies down, but it then will pick up again in the spring. So enjoy the calm moments of your PTA work. It is kind of a roller coaster sometimes. Take the administrative advantage by, having all those tools in your toolkit, by knowing your bylaws, by the standing rules, and employing those important soft skills. And finally, in your work, keeping an eye to the future and who's going to be your next generation of parent leadership for your unit. All right, and I think we have one final poll. So was this helpful? Was this training helpful? Yes, I learned a lot. Not really. Learned a few things along the way, and finally, I'm still confused and I still really need help. And
Maureen,
I will say,
do you feel like we should be singing Jeopardy right now?
you don't want to hear my singing voice. I could do some dog barking. Well, I'm glad to hear that the majority, or learned that the majority of folks attending did find this valuable. If you are still on the fence, I hope we can figure out how to fill that void for you. I know Kara, Maureen, we're here. We have a wonderful, as I said, Nova PTA leadership team. And as Kara said, being a PTA leader is supporting our other leaders. And that to me is the most meaningful part of the job, is being able to support others. So please reach out to us. We have 10 minutes for questions. Is that right? So if you have a question, I think we want to have it in the chat. And someone is monitoring the chat for us, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Maureen and Kara. You guys were absolutely awesome. This is Debbie Kilpatrick, and Jason and myself and Anne-Marie have been monitoring the questions in the chat. So at this time, if anyone would like to ask a question, we can unmute you. If you raise your hand in the attendees list. Let me and we'll keep an eye out.
So for those of you that answered, I still need help. This is the slide for you, right? This will tell you who, if you're a Fairfax County Public Schools, you want to talk to me, right? I'm fccpta.org. We have Maureen's on here. This is where you go to start to find your help. So just remember that one thing, if we only learned one thing, it's that you're not alone and there are people here to help you. So reach out to your counsel. If you don't know who your counsel is, reach out to Debbie or Hamid and they can put you in touch with the right person.
Okay, and we have Julie that I'm going to unmute her. She's self-muted, but she has her hand raised. Go ahead, Julie.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. It's great, very handy. Just a question, because there's some differing opinions among our board. What is the take on paying for field trips for the principal in the school?
Is it equal? Are you paying for field trips for all students? And is it approximately the same amount?
Well, it was just sort of a matter of going over the budget, and we added a lot more this year because we had a surplus from last year. And I mean, the goal the principal has actually is to at least pay for a really nice 5th grade field trip.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hoping that because we're giving her more money, she'll be able to spread that elsewhere as well.
So a few things to think about, right? Number one, it's your general membership that can decide. If you are feeling differently amongst your board, don't let your board decide, let the general membership decide, right? That would be my first kind of piece. The second thing to think about goes back to the questions I asked earlier. Are we paying the same amount of money for each grade level? And I say this because when the PTA spends money, it should have the ability to affect every single child in that school, not just the 5th graders, not just the 4th graders, every child. One of the ways that my school handled that when we paid for field trips was to say, okay, we will pay $400 for every grade level to have a field trip. If it's beyond $400, that grade needs to come up with the difference. And that's kind of how we solved it, because what was happening is that, sixth grade was spending $700 on field trips and first grade was spending $200. And I realized that that's not a lot of money, but if you're a Title I school, that's a lot of money. So leave it up to your general membership and then try to be equitable. Maureen, did you have anything to add? I kind of just jumped in.
No, that sounds right. When I was PTA president, and I mean, this was a precedent that had been established way before me, is that our PTA would pay for all of our school field trips. And it was the largest portion of our budget. And that was just, it was easy to do it that way. But it was a significant amount of money. And not every school can provide that.
That helps a lot because it actually answers a few other questions as well. So I think that with that, all you said, it just means that we need to take another chunk and put it towards the lower grades, because unfortunately there are not a lot of clubs for them. We couldn't get going. So thank you. I mean, that really helps. So.
Hey, thanks. And we have a question asked, I think it's by Emily. What does Virginia PTA do for a local unit?
Well, they provide training. They also, besides training, they are a resource for any questions. All of our good standing status is through them. So they provide that mechanism of certifying that we're in compliance to be a 401c3 organization. Kara, what else?
So I think there's a couple of things to think about when it comes to our relationship with Virginia PTA. So our bylaws are chartered under Virginia PTA. That's important to remember. We would not be able to have a PTA if it wasn't for Virginia PTA. And that legal stuff alone is a huge nightmare that they have taken off of our plate, right? As Maureen mentioned, they provide training. They had about 6 months of training going on right now. They had a whole bunch of summer training, and then they will have training in the fall as well. In addition to training, they provide direct support to our districts. So Debbie and Hamid attend, probably weekly meetings with Virginia PTA, and they pass down information to them, and then Debbie and Hamid pass the information to us at the council level, and then we pass it down to Virginia PTA. They also provide programs. They sponsor our programs like Reflections.
I'm trying to advocate.
Yeah, they advocate. They did so much last year. Do you realize that every child in Virginia has free breakfast and free lunch because of the advocacy that Virginia PTA took part of? We pushed really hard for that. Virginia PTA also pushed really, really, really hard to make sure that we kept our funding. So all the budget was approved last year, right? Then COVID happened and the economy tanked and they had to redo the entire budget, and everything had money taken away from the budget, but the schools didn't, because Virginia PTA was like, dude, we can't open schools if you take away money. If we need schools to be open, we need money to do it. So it's important to remember that there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that maybe we don't pay attention to as much because we're so consumed with our local units. I can definitely understand how it might seem that there's a detachment, but I do know that the current president, Pam Kroom, she really wants to engage with the local units. That really is a passion of hers, to make this more proactive of a relationship where it goes both ways. I'm hoping that answered some of it. I don't know if Debbie, you wanted to add anything?
You touched on the main components, which was especially the advocacy work that Virginia PTA does. They are, just to let everyone know, our representatives at the state level, they are on multiple boards of other education associations. So we have a place at each and every table, having a voice at all of these other education associations. And that's very, very important. The governor meets with our state leaders. The Secretary of Education, they will take their calls. So having a voice at the state level is so key. But that filters down to us. I mean, they represent us. And if there's an issue here at the local level, we need to push it up so that state can be aware of what that local issue is. And then that way they can advocate through their network and through their communications. But district, I can repeat this, council, district, and state work for you. That's what we're here for. We are all also volunteers. So, you know, we do it because we feel passionate about what we do. And we know that you feel passionate about what you do because you're joining us tonight, right? And you want to know more. Now, I hope that answers the question, but there's tons of stuff on the Virginia PTA website to back it up. But Christian, I think it's Christian, I'm going to unmute. They've had their hand up. They're self-muted. There you go. You have a question?
Yes, this is Christian. Thank you. I can't believe y'all are all volunteers at all these levels. Thank you so much. This was so helpful. You've given me places to turn for this, but since I have you here, are there any resources or support for translation and interpretation, or is every local PTA on their own for that?
Every local unit is on their own.
Use your school. I mean, in Alexandria, we're very, very lucky because our central office will interpret documents for our PTAs. So it really depends on the relationship that your PTAs have with your school administration.
So I love that you asked this question. I have been pushing for Virginia PTA and for National PTA to provide this as a service to all of its local units. So if you want to help me raise my voice and continue to advocate, because we talk about diversity and inclusion, it'd be great to have that support from the top, wouldn't it?
It does. I'd love to help you, Kara.
Okay.
We have a comment.
I'll send you an email.
Okay.
Kendra had a comment regarding a question earlier about field trips.
Hi, everyone. My name's Kendra Anderson. I'm actually going to be one of the presenters in the next session, but since I'm not sure that all of you are going to stay, I just wanted to quickly circle back to the question about paying for field trips. So yes, it is true that ideally your PTA would allocate the same or similar amount of money to every student. However, it also is definitely reasonable if your school has a field trip, say at 4th grade to Jamestown, that's an expensive field trip, and your PTA decides that in general you are going to pay for that field trip, which is very expensive. You can say that this is a special event, it's important enough that it stands on its own, and put it in your budget as a, oh my God, the word just disappeared, from a restricted line item, and make it something special. So I don't really know the specifics, obviously, of that question, but just because you spend, $500 on 5th grade field trips doesn't mean you have to spend $500 on 1st grade field trip. For one thing, 1st grade and 5th grade could have different number of students. So you kind of want to look that it's balanced, but it's balanced in a reasonable sense based on the number of students in the grade and also what the grade themselves needs. So Kara kind of mentioned that, but I just wanted to elaborate on that a little bit more.
And I would think, if you don't mind me interjecting, I would think if it's an annual tradition type of a thing where every student, when they get to 5th grade, they're going to go on that trip, that's going to make it seem a lot more reasonable than if it's a one-off type of a thing.
So I'm going to push back on both of you. And see, and this is why it's important to have general membership consensus, right? What if you are a parent who is there from preschool through 4th grade, and every year you give, or preschool through 3rd grade, and every year you give money to the PTA, and then in 4th grade you're no longer at that school and you don't get to see the fruits of your fundraising for the PTA for several years. So I think it's interesting that we all have different opinions, and I think that these opinions can make for a great conversation amongst your board and amongst your general membership, and to let your general membership decide the best path forward.
Absolutely true, Kara. My point was just that it's not wrong to make that decision if your general membership agrees.
Hey,
And
guys.
I agree with you. Thanks.
I just wanted to give you guys a time check. It's actually it's over into our next session for where Kendra does get a chance, and so does Jamie, and Marie. But I did want to thank both of you guys for an excellent presentation. I have put into the chat, into the question, if there are several questions we didn't get to. But if they will just email myself or Hamid, I put in the email addresses there. We will make sure we pass them on to Kara and Maureen, though their emails were also there on the last slide. A copy of this recording will be given to you. You'll receive it tomorrow afternoon, probably. So thank you both so much. You were awesome. And I will now pass it over to our next presenters, Jamie, and we have Kendra, and moderated by Anne Marie.
Yeah, I'm on a computer that has no video. Sorry, guys.
No problem, Kendra. Thank you for joining us. So, Jamie, it looks like you're going to be the one scene. Anne Marie, you're also on. Anne Marie is our Virginia PTA treasurer, who is going to help moderate the questions and answer anything that these two experienced treasurers have any concerns with. Go for it.
All right. So we have a lot to cover this evening, so we're going to go ahead and get started and move through it pretty quickly to make sure that you guys all have time for questions. All right. So for our agenda, Anne-Marie, we're going to understand what to submit to the IRS and the VA PTA and how. Identify the best methods for providing financial reports. Define and understand how PTA funds can and should be used. Understand how to use MemberHub for submitting dues and membership rosters. And understanding grants and scholarships. So Kendra and I are just going to switch on and off tonight. The first section we're going to talk to is IRS and tax information. I'm not really sure. Okay, there we go. Yep. Okay, so as Kara and the last presentation did touch on, we are 501c3 organizations under the umbrella of the Virginia PTA. What this means is that we're income tax exempt, but your sales tax is based on your own local PTA and it is optional. Donations by our donors are treated as charitable. We must be organized and operate according to the mission set forth in our bylaws. So we advocate for health, education, and welfare of all children. We're non-sectarian, non-commercial, nonpartisan, and that's really important. We cannot engage in political activities or, resources cannot be used for private benefit. Next slide, please. Okay, so here are IRS requirements for 501c3 organizations. You must file taxes each and every year. We have to follow the 3-to-1 rule. This basically means for every one fundraiser we have to have 3 programs to give or give backs to our school. Those things can be movie nights, newsletters, they can be big or small, but you've got to be doing the 3-to-1 ratio. And spending must fall within 3 categories: education, operation, and charitable. And And the benefit here is that you can fundraise without paying federal income tax or federal taxes on your income. All right, most PTAs file a Form 990. It's a 990, 990 Easy, or a 990 NE postcard. Most of our local chapters do file the postcard. It has to be filed with the IRS on the 15th day of the 5th month after the end of your fiscal years. So for us, November 15th. Once you submit it, once you've got your 990 accepted, you get that note from the IRS, you have to go ahead and submit it for compliance purposes to the Virginia Department, Virginia PTA. You can do that either emailing it to liaison@vapta.org, and we're also requesting that you upload it into MemberHub in your compliance documents.
Jamie, can I stop you really quickly?
Sure.
I don't know if people have logged on to MemberHub this year, but they went through a major upgrade over the summer. Things look very different, but there is a compliance something still on the left-hand side where you can put all of these documents in. So if you haven't logged in yet this year, expect it to look a little different and take an extra minute or two to figure out where things are.
Okay. And then if your PTA would like to do a Virginia sales tax exemption, you can go to www.tax.virginia.gov /MPO, and you can apply and get your sales use tax or certificate of exemption letter. Additionally, this is optional, but it can save you money. All right, so this is a big one. Talking about good standing. You have to update your officer information. Once your elections are held and you have new officers, it must be updated. We will talk a little bit about MemberHub a little bit further in to the presentation, but we really, really, really suggest that you try doing this through MemberHub. And for anybody who is with FCC PTA, we're going to host a roundtable all about how you do this. So we're happy to have you join us. Membership dues have to be paid November 1 to Virginia PTA. Your dues to your county PTA may be due in a little bit different, but you have to pay on November 1 to Virginia. You have to complete a financial review. We used to call it an audit. All right. It has to be approved by your membership. So you have to do the audit. You have to present it to your executive board, and then once that's done, you have to present it and have it voted on by your general membership, and it has to be sent to Virginia PTA no later than November 15th, and that goes to the same liaison@vapta.org. There's also, as Kendra had pointed out, a compliance piece in MemberHub, and you upload it there as well. You need to send your IRS 990 confirmation and your proof of insurance. Both of those have to go to VAPTA. And then a new requirement for bylaws is you must submit an approved local unit organization structure form. This is due November 15th. Are there any questions about that section? And we'll have Q&A at the end as well. So if there's no questions now, we can just move on, and then we can answer questions at the end. I know, Anne Marie, you're monitoring our chat, so if there's anything.
Yeah, the question box is being finicky this evening, so I'm actually not seeing, I don't know if questions have come in there, but both Debbie and I cannot see any questions. I don't know, Jason, if you've seen anything.
Yeah, I can see a couple. So we've got, let's see, well, we have one person who left, but someone was asking, is everything in MemberHub?
Everything is in MemberHub. We really are encouraging units to use MemberHub this year as a one-stop shop. You don't have to use it for your own purposes, but we really are asking for folks to make sure that their membership rosters are there, their officers are there, and all their compliance documents are there. It's also a really easy way to pay your dues.
And I'll go ahead and ask the question that someone who unfortunately left was asking about the annual one-page organization structure. When is that due?
November 15th.
November 15th. Okay. Actually, I think that was from the last session. Oh, what? Here's a good one. Here's a good one.
I'm ready.
What happens if PTAs miss any of these deadlines?
Well, it takes a while to be considered in bad standing or not in good standing, but you don't ever want to get there. As soon as your PTA realizes that they have missed a deadline, depending on what it is, you need to start to reach out to your county, your district, and then the state to say, hey, we missed this deadline. What do we have to do? How can we make it up? The really tricky one is when you miss taxes. That is, and I will tell you from my own experience, that hurts. And so you do have to go back and file those documents. You do have to go back and do those. But acknowledging that you've done it, asking for help, those are the steps, and then everybody else can help you along. Because what we never want to see is a PTA who forgot to do something, or may have had a board member who faced some hard times and didn't get to it, then fail consistently because we didn't help them out. So that is where you come to us and we help you through it.
Jamie,
Yeah.
can I say something? Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Speaking as the Virginia PTA treasurer, this, when I'm a volunteer like everybody else here, I did not really know a lot about how finances worked at the state level, but we run on a shoestring like a lot of PTAs at the state level. And so when I was a local unit treasurer, I would pay the dues on the deadline. And when I was a council treasurer, I found that a lot of PTAs didn't even do that. They would come in late. And at the council and at the state level, we rely on that dues income to meet our own financial obligations. So it really hurts not just your good standing, but the ability of your state office. And even though I am a volunteer, we do have employees for us to pay payroll. We have an office that we have to keep running. So the dues cover that. And I think a lot of times PTAs they just think that the dues kind of like float off into nowhere, but they're actually supporting the council and the state. And the other thing that I wanted to say, most of the other things that are on here are Virginia PTA requirements to make sure that our PTAs are healthy. And we ask for them so that we can make sure that we keep your PTA going. The IRS one is really the one, the tax filing is the one that, like Jamie said, can cause you trouble. You could be hit with fines and penalties, and they are steep. They don't care that you are a little elementary school PTA. The other things, though, just really allow us to keep track. And, the Commonwealth of Virginia is huge. We have thousands of PTAs. And so you meeting these things on time help us make sure that your PTA is strong and healthy. Thanks.
And Jamie, I had one more thing. Thank you, Anne Marie. That was excellent information. I wanted to also remind our local PTAs that to apply for grants and to apply for reflections for your students to participate in state or national PTA programs, you must be a PTA in good standing. The national PTA, before they award any grants, they go back to the state and they check to see is the PTA they're going to award funds to, are they in good standing with their state association? So this is just something that affects not only, maybe someone forgot to do something, but it can affect your students within your school and the health of your PTA overall and any kind of additional income or non-dues revenue that comes your way. So there's a lot of things. And number one, Virginia PTA wants you to, have your 501c3 letter so that you can operate and be tax exempt. These are just all things that have to be met, and to be affiliated with a member organization. in which you are, you know. So sorry, just wanted to share that.
Fantastic. Can we go on to the next slide? All right, let's talk financial reports because they're fun. Next slide, please. All right, so here are the types of reports that treasurers are expected to do. There's a monthly treasurer's report, and that ensures that your PTA spending is approved and within the budget. You know, this is really important to making sure that you have transparency in your spending with your general membership. The next kind are your fiscal year financial review or financial reports. This is the one that comes at the end of the year, your annual report, which shows all of your expenditures, all the income that you have against what your budget initially was. And it ensures that PTAs are following proper financial procedures. So for instance, if you vote on your budget in September, let's say, and you pass it, if there's some big grant that you get, you have to write that back into your budget and re-vote on it. And so a lot of these reports are clear indicators that you're following those rules and regulations and that you're spending within your budget. Next slide, please. So here's, you know, an example. So in your monthly budget, you're going to say, what's the balance from the last meeting? What's the itemized income, itemized expenses, your current balance, and you always want to give an idea of what you budgeted versus what was actual. There are always going to be times that you're off a couple of dollars here or there. You thought it was $50, it wound up being $55. That kind of stuff happens, but what that helps you to do is then project out for future months as well as for future years. And the analysis that you do on that obviously helps you make good decisions. Like, are you meeting your mission? What's the impact of your spending on your mission? Do you have opportunities for savings? You know, did you not have to spend as much here or there? And you can kind of figure out what the downward or upward trends are in your fundraising to say, all of these programs that I planned, I can't do them all because I didn't fundraise enough. And again, that's another thing that you're consistently showing your membership for transparency in your budget. And then obviously you're comparing year to year so that you can kind of see, okay, so this year spending in this particular area went up by 3%. We need to note that for next year. And it really makes you fiscally responsible as a PTA. Next slide, please. All right, I know this is small, but we do have, Virginia PTA has for us a treasurer month-to-month checklist. And as you can see, it gives you all of the items that you have to do every single month. And then it also gives you the additional items that you have to do in certain months, like July and August. You're reviewing the financial records, you're getting your financial review committee together. You know, in November, you're paying dues. In, you know, June, you're preparing your financial files. So this checklist very nicely lays it out, and it is on Virginia PTA's website, and I use it myself still. So it's very helpful, and it allows you to just kind of go through and say, okay, did I do all these things? Yes, check, and done. Next slide. All right, fiscal review, not a fail or pass. It's not like a test, right? We really just want to make sure that all of our PTAs are following the proper financial procedures and that you're being responsible about your spending. And what this says to us is if you're not, it helps us make recommendations to get a PTA back on track. So, you know, if a financial review is done and a recommendation is that, you know, the previous treasurer maybe didn't keep as many receipts as they should have, or didn't reconcile the accounts every month, those are recommendations that then go into the financial review. And the next treasurer can pick those up and say, okay, I see the places where we didn't do so well and I need to just do better. And this is really a two-part process. The treasurer and president gather all of their records for the period, which for most of us is July 1 to June 30. They go through the
All of us now with the uniform bylaws, everybody is July 1st to June 30th. If you weren't before, you need to reach out to your local council, who will reach out to the Virginia PTA, because that has to be fixed with the IRS. You have to have July 1st to June 30th, and it's not a fun process if you're not, but the Virginia PTA is helping us with that.
Okay, thank you. And then once you have all your records, there's a piece for treasurers to fill out of the financial review, and then that entire packet along with your notebook, whether that's paper or electronic, goes to the financial review committee, and they go through it and they check, you know, did you have all your receipts? Did you have all your bank reconciliations? Do you have your general administrative items? Once it's complete, you present that, the committee presents that to the executive board. The executive board adopts it, and then it goes to your general membership. Once your general membership approves it, your president and treasurer sign off, and it gets emailed to the Virginia PTA. Next slide, please. Okay. Any time a new treasurer takes over, a financial review has to be complete. And I know you're saying, but Jamie, what if it's like, you know, 3 months until the end of the fiscal year? It doesn't matter. Anytime the financial responsibility goes from one treasurer to another, the review has to be completed. And this is really to make sure that whatever was done before, good, you know, carries forward, bad gets corrected. All right, and then obviously at the end of the fiscal year, we're doing one. The financial review committee generally consists of 3 people appointed by the executive board. It cannot be anybody who has signatory authority on any of the accounts or a family member of any of those people. They can come from your board or your general membership. There's got to be a chair that gets elected that kind of paces this through with the committee. And then, you know, that is the board who ultimately fills out the financial review and carries it forward. Now, I know one question we get a lot is, can we have a CPA or an audit firm do this? You can, but I don't know that it's an expense that a small, you know, local PTA without a ton of funding would want to spend money on. But again, totally up to you. Next slide. All right, do we have any questions about financial reports?
We're checking, Jamie.
Okay, no worries.
While they're checking, I wanted to address, somebody had asked a question that said they felt that the local unit organization form is unduly burdensome on already busy volunteers. There are, well, for one thing, this eliminates you needing to update your bylaws, which was an incredibly difficult process. The first time through, maybe it will take a little bit of extra time, but a good chunk of the information on this new form is the same from year to year. Your unit doesn't change, your tax ID number doesn't change, your address doesn't change. I mean, I guess unless your school moves. Your principal name could change, your school district doesn't change, your PTA district. So once you fill this out one time, the only pieces of information you're really going to be changing are your policy number for your insurance carrier, if your dues, if the amount of your lowest membership dues change, the titles of your elected officers, if those change, if you decide to change the term length. But really, once you fill this out one time, you can use it year after year unless your membership decides to change anything. Like they don't want to have 10 meetings per year. They want to have 20 meetings per year. Then you would need to make a change. I went through this, not just for our council, but also for our local PTA, and it took about 10 minutes. Now, you got to present it to your general membership, maybe explain some things, get it approved, but it should really only be taking about 10 to 15 minutes to fill it out if anybody feels like it's taking a lot more than that, please, please, please reach out to your counsel to see where you might be confused on what is taking so much time.
Thanks, Kendra. I do have a question. Someone's raised their hand. I have unmuted them. It's Partness. Would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Hi.
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. For the financial review, on the last page, I believe there's some there's a sheet that needs to be filled out. Does that need to be filled out by the treasurer, or the financial review committee fills it out? It has questions about the finances, like the year-end finances of the PTA from the previous year.
Sure, that's an excellent question. It's actually the review committee who fills that out, although I have to be very honest with you. When I took over this role, the previous treasurer kind of did it for herself to check and make sure, and I actually carried that forward. So most treasurers will fill it out, just, pen and paper, to make sure that they know what's going on and make sure that whatever the review committee is going to find is exactly what they expect. But for the purpose of the actual review that kind of goes through your membership and your executive board, it is the financial review committee who takes those bank statements, takes your expenditures, takes your income, and make sure that those bank numbers match.
Okay, thank you very much.
Absolutely, great question.
And we have one more question. Shauna Yoon, I think you're self-muted. You can unmute. Your treasurer, Lake Braddock, I think. There you go. Go ahead. We can't hear you. Okshana? Okay. Okay, go ahead, Jamie.
Okay.
She maybe will come in. She's unmuted, but maybe there's issues on her end.
All right. So with that, guys, I'm going to kick it over to Kendra to do our next section.
Okay, next page. Okay, before I start, I have had a very bad cold, and if I start having a crazy coughing fit, I'm going to mute myself and Jamie's going to jump back in. But I'm going to talk first about PTA funds and their appropriate and also inappropriate use. So PTA mission. The PTA's mission is to make every child's potential a reality by engaging and empowering families and communities to advocate for all children. Okay, so that's our mission, and that's what we should be spending any money that we raise to do. Next slide, please. Okay, when you think of spending PTA money, you're going to look at your PTA's mission, which we just went over because that's every PTA's mission, and your strategic objectives. The strategic objectives should have been something that your executive council/board put together. So what are your priorities? Every year, the executive committee should have certain things that are going to be really a priority to them within that framework. So is the priority to improve participation at community events that you host? Is a priority to increase advocacy with your school district? Whatever it might be, they're usually 3 to 4 priorities, and then you want to line your expenses up with those. You have three basic types of expenses. Operational expenses. So those are things that keep your PTA running. How much it costs you to have your insurance, money that you need to spend on copying, if you use a hosted website. Those are all things that just keep your PTA up and running. Then you have program services. So that's usually the bulk of your expenses, and those are things like teacher grants, student clubs, field trips. Nothing else is coming to mind right now, probably because I'm still on some pretty good drugs for my cold. But so that's really the bulk of what you spend. And the last expenses are your fundraising expenses. So let's say that you put on a fun run. Well, maybe you pay a third party to organize that for you. Unless that's somehow you never see the money and pay them, you need to put that in as an expense. So if you raise $10,000, but the agreement was that you would pay 1% of whatever you earn to this third party, then you have to put that in as one of your expenses. You know, if you're putting on a dance, but you're going to have to pay for a DJ, then you have to put in that expense. Now, how are you going to raise funds to support these priorities? So there are definitely donations. Again, these are charitable, as Jamie mentioned earlier. You cannot do any quid pro quo, like, hey, I'll donate $500 to this PTA, but my kid gets to do X, Y, Z. None of that. But so you can have donations. A lot of companies do matching donations. So that's a great thing to ask members if they donate. When you send out your thank you letter for donations, you can ask if their company matches funds. Next slide, please. I was definitely missing some stuff. Okay, where did the rest of that slide go? In addition to donations, you can also have grants. You can get donations from businesses. And obviously then you also have your fundraisers. Okay, so, all right, hang on a second. I feel like something is really out of sync here, but it should not be. Hang on a second. Something definitely got lost there. Okay.
I'm sorry, Kendra.
Moving on.
Were you you covered the when you think of spending PTA money already, correct?
Yes, I just feel like there was something missing on that slide, but I guess not.
Okay, well, that's okay.
Excuse me. Okay, so once your treasurer or your finance committee, if you have one, has put together the budget based on your priorities, the budget goes back to the executive board and gets presented. Now, this can be a lot of back and forth with the executive board and the treasurer, but once you have your budget set, you're going to post it for 30 days in advance of the general membership meeting, and then you're going to present it to your general membership for approval. You should be going over it at your general membership meeting at a high level. You don't have to go through every single line item. If you're still doing virtual, meetings, you should give people a few minutes to be able to get it through your chat or look at it on the screen. If you're back to doing in-person meetings or a blend, make sure that the in-person folks have a physical copy or that they can get to a physical copy, because usually when you're presenting something in person, the budget is too large and written too small for people to be able to see it on the screen. Next slide, please. Okay, so as you're going through the school year, the big question is it in the budget? Your budget really is your defining truth. only expenses that are approved can be paid. So if an expense comes in that doesn't fit in your budget, you can't pay it. You can go and amend your budget with general membership approval and then pay it, but you can't just say, oh, this seems like a worthy thing to pay for and pay it. You have to use a reimbursement process or form. There's some good examples on the Virginia website. We put a link in the chat early on of where to find all of these forms on the Virginia website. And everything has to have a receipt or invoice, so that not only can you say, I paid this much, but this is exactly what I got. You want to define your internal controls. And by your internal controls, that means what your process is for letting people know what expenses will be reimbursed, how you're going to collect the information to reimburse those, and how you're going to pay them. The PTA hasn't completely caught up with where technology is nowadays. And with COVID, this has become even more important. A lot of PTAs ask if they can reimburse people electronically. And you can reimburse people electronically, but you need to follow the same procedures as if you were writing a physical check. And by that, I mean, you need to have a piece of paper that says, I'm reimbursing person A by this method, PayPal, for this purpose, which is in this place in my budget, and here are the two people that are signing off on this, and whoever the signers would be, just as if it was a check. And that needs to exist, either an electronic copy or hard copy, as part of your record. You can't just pay somebody with PayPal and say, oh, well, you know, it was in the budget. Same thing if you're going to send an electronic check from your bank account, bill pay, a lot of people will know it as. You still need to have two signers on that, even if they are not physically signing the check. They need to approve the reimbursement form so that if the IRS ever comes knocking, that you have proof that two people signed off on paying for this expense. Excuse me. Next slide, please. Okay. Jamie touched on this briefly, and also it was touched on at the last session. The PTA money is only for PTA use. The PTA members control the use of the funds, mostly through their elected board, but also by approving their budget and amendments. If you get donations of more than $250, you should be acknowledging that with either a note or an email that says no goods or services were received in return for the contribution. Do not, repeat, do not raise or donate money to individuals or families in crisis. We all know somebody whose house burned, whose mother got hit by a car, whose father died of COVID. It's terrible. We all acknowledge that it's terrible. It is not the PTA's purpose to do that. And I'm going to talk about gift cards more in a minute. Also, you cannot use your PTA bank account or PayPal account or any account to hold money for something that's not a PTA program. So if you're doing a co-sponsored fundraiser with another organization, unless you've set out and that organization has a similar mission to the PTA, you cannot just say, okay, well, we took in $10,000 and we agreed to split it 50-50 with, oh, I don't know, the breast cancer survivors of America. You can't do that. If for some reason you're jointly holding a fundraiser, that money needs to be taken directly from receipts and given to the other organization. You can't gather money and hold it for your school because your school thinks that's convenient. You can only take in money that is for your PTA. Next slide, please. Okay, 3-to-1 rule. This was mentioned in the last slide, and also Jamie last session, and Jamie mentioned it earlier. For every fundraising activity that you do, there needs to be 3 non-fundraising projects. These can be little, these can be big, whatever you want, but the projects should be aimed at helping parents, children. Helping children includes helping staff or advocating for school and education improvements. And we have some lists of things, but really programs can be almost anything that you imagine them to be. Next slide, please. Money tips, money tips, money tips. Don't sign blank checks. Don't make sure you have 2 unrelated signers on all checks or reimbursement forms. Make sure your bank statement is reconciled monthly, ideally with somebody other than your treasurer, and make sure that your treasurer's report is included in the minutes. You don't approve your treasurer's report each month, you present it, and then when the minutes are approved at the next meeting, the treasurer's report is embedded in those minutes and is approved as part of approving those minutes. Deposit funds immediately. Nobody gets to take money home for 3 days, have it sit in their house. Ideally, you deposit it in the after hours if you have a late running fundraiser. If that's not possible because of wherever you bank, it's too much money, whatever it is, you deposit it as soon as the bank opens the next day. And obviously, you keep your PTA funds separate. You don't like deposit the PTA funds temporarily in your own bank account and then move it 3 days later. And same thing with the school. Next slide, please. Gift cards. Everybody loves gift cards. They're so easy. And that is the exact reason that the PTA really discourages the use of them. We really recommend not using gift cards at all. Gift cards are cash. You can't solicit the gift card. You can't solicit gift cards from people and then distribute them out. And that's because you have no way of tracking how people might spend a gift card. If there are people at your school that want to put together any type of drive that includes gift cards, you certainly, as a PTA, can advertise that. It's for the good of your community. And you can share anything that you think is for the good of your community through various channels, social media, newsletters, school talks, whatever it might be. You need to be clear that it is not a PTA-sponsored event. And you know, 3 parents could get together and run something. Your PTA run a fundraiser for all families hit by COVID, or even for a single family whose house burned down. And the PTA can advertise that, but they need to be clear that this is not a PTA funded activity and it's not a charitable donation. And there's some language in there that you can use if you find yourself in a situation to do that. Next slide, please. Okay. Some ways that, so yes, you can purchase gift cards. It comes with potential for misuse. So we're going to briefly talk about how you can get around that, how you can avoid that choice of your words. So PTAs sometimes use gift cards as prizes or incentives, as stipends for teachers, as donated merchandise for silent auctions, or as thank you gifts. So It's a problem because there's loss of accountability. It's also potentially a problem because it can be looked upon as an employee-employer relationship. And if the PTA is ever found to be an employer, then you become subject to payroll filings and taxes. Next slide, please. Okay, so how do we avoid these pitfalls? Treat your gift cards as cash. If you're going to do anything, especially as student prizes, institute a log to make sure that you have somebody signing for each of those, and that matches up with the invoice where you bought those gift cards. Limit the use of gift cards to items in your approved budget. And if you need to give somebody a gift card, you need to make sure that they give you back the receipts so that you can match it up, that you can show that you didn't just give somebody money. And also, gift cards or cash as thank you gifts is one of the biggest gray areas for the IRS. So if you are going to use that as a thank you gift, you should not be exceeding $25 to any single individual for your fiscal year. Okay, question and answer. I see Jason posted maybe a few things. Okay, hang on a second.
I think we may have one question, Kendra.
Yep.
Let me see if she's still there. Oh yeah, I'm gonna unmute Asanya. There you go. Are you able to ask your question? Her hand was up. It just came up a little while ago. Okay. I'm not quite sure. All right. She can put it in the quote. Are you there?
No, this is Jamie. I'm sorry.
Okay. All
So
right.
we've had
worries.
Okay, we've had a lot of questions in the chat around gift cards. And Kendra, I just was wondering if I could read a couple to you and have you answer them so that they can be recorded. So the first one is really around gift cards for teachers, you know, during times like Teacher Appreciation Week and things like that. And I think you covered it, but if you could just one more time kind of clarify when it would be okay to use them and when it is absolutely not okay to use them.
Kendra, you're self-muted.
Ah, sorry. Yeah, my husband just forgot to pick up my kid and she's panicked. Sorry. Can you please repeat the last question?
Absolutely. So what if what about when PTA wants to give it to teachers for things like, you know, Teacher Appreciation Week or something like that?
You should not be, for Teacher Appreciation Week, you should not be giving teachers cash or gift cards. You could be giving them tangible items. You could give them a cup of coffee. You could give them chocolates. You could give them notebooks. You could give them, you know, you can have them make a wish list. Obviously, a lot of people do food-related things that week. You really, really should not be giving them gift cards at Teacher Appreciation Week. You know, if it's something really small, like you're doing some cute coffee thing and you put in a $5 Starbucks gift card, you know, that's not going to get you into trouble down the road. But if you give each teacher a $100 gift card to, say, Amazon, that can really get you into trouble down the road. Because how do you know if you give them that gift card that they're going to spend it on something for the school? Because remember, whatever we do, it's supposed to, in the end, benefit the students. So, you know, you give the teacher a $100 gift card with the idea that they're going to provide things for their classroom. But if it's a thank you gift, it really should be a tangible item. Hope that answers that question.
Can I also interrupt too? Something that sometimes you can do is like have a raffle. So you could have parents donate like $5 or $10 Starbucks gift cards. All the teachers' names go in a hat, and then you pick out 5 or 10, something like that, where then it doesn't put that, you know, employee-employer relationship, because that's really the IRS concern here. Like, I think you did a great job of talking about, you know, like there's accountability things, you know, like we have lots of situations where things get stolen or misused. But, you know, when it comes to the IRS, you really should not be giving cash or gift cards without some sort of, you know, documentation that it's being used for the mission. And so, like Kendra said, you know, little tokens of appreciation, you know, tangible items is what the IRS calls de minimis. And that is totally cool, like a pen, you know, something, little thing, food. But yeah, the IRS treats gift cards as cash.
Okay, let's continue on. We can have people stay after 9, but I do want to respect people's time. So I may talk very quickly. Oh, MemberHub, that's you, Jamie.
All right, let's talk MemberHub. Go ahead, Jason. Next slide, please. All right, every Virginia PTA has or should have a MemberHub account. The president, secretary, and membership chair, as well as any other officer, should have admin access and should have their contact information in MemberHub. Please, 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 if you have not updated your information, please do so. It is super important because more and more we're going to start using MemberHub to contact PTAs. If you do not have a MemberHub account, it's not something you just need to go out and pay for and have. Call the Virginia PTA. There's actually a person at VA PTA, and her name is escaping me at this point, but she makes sure that Virginia PTA, local PTAs have MemberHub accounts. It has a ton of features, but from a compliance standpoint, you got to have your officer information. You got to have your membership list. You got to have your annual financial review, your 990, your organizational structure form, and your insurance policy, all uploaded into MemberHub. If you have any issues with that, please contact Virginia PTA. Next slide. We're going to skip MemberHub questions and leave those to the end because we have another couple of groups that we need to go through. So Kendra, back over to you for grants and scholarships.
Sounds good. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, grants and scholarships are different. We're going to go through those pretty quickly. Grants. You can get grants from PTA and non-PTA sources. Only apply for grants that reflect the mission of the PTA, which is right there. If a grant has a restriction, if a grant that you apply for and receive has a restriction on it, you need to make sure that that information is provided to your general membership, and then your PTA has the responsibility to ensure that the funds are dispersed with whatever the restriction is. So a lot of people applied for and got healthy kid fund grants last year, and those had very specific things they could be used on. So you needed to create a separate line item in your budget and only spend that money on those things. Remember, restricted line items in a budget carry over from year to year. It's about the only thing that does. The general membership does need to vote on the expense line for that grant, right? Okay, next slide. Oh, as a PTA, before I get to scholarships, as a PTA, you can also set up a grant fund for people to apply for grants from you. Those are people in your community, your school community. So you could set up a student club grant fund where student clubs could apply to you and say why they need some money from the PTA. A lot of schools have teacher grant funds where they set aside money and teachers apply to the grant fund, again, for money that would be used in accordance with the purpose. Scholarships. PTAs can set up scholarships as long as they fit in with your mission. These could be membership scholarships, college scholarships, training scholarships, and so on. The important thing is that scholarships have to be equitable. They need to ensure that the criteria and expectations are visible to your membership. So you can't create a scholarship for, this specific ethnicity or this specific geography. You can ask sponsors to help or provide your scholarships. That's fine. However, if you do solicit funds specifically for scholarship, you have to create a restricted line item, because if you don't use it in year one, you have to carry that money over for that purpose and that purpose only in perpetuity until the line item is gone. Next slide, please. Okay, what's the difference between grants and scholarships? Grants are usually need-based. Scholarships can be need or merit-based. When you have a PTA grant, it usually provides funds for a program, transportation, speakers, fees, and the application process should focus on the activity the funds are being requested for and the benefit from the community, and it can take into account where else funds can be sought. PTA scholarships usually provide funds for a person or persons, which is an exception to the IRS Endowment Clause, which states that you cannot, no funds can be spent to the individual benefit of a person. However, you need to make sure that that application process and requirements for the scholarship should focus on people's personal attributes, possibly the need of the person applying, without consideration of where else the person might seek the funds. Next slide, please. Okay, this is our last section, right? I think, with the exception of like some resource slides. So Jason, do you want to go to the next slide? Okay, the next two or three slides have resources. So are there any more questions that people have?
I'm just checking if they raise their hand, we will unmute them and they can ask their question. No one is raising their hand right now. And I think we've answered most of the questions that were in the question box. Wait, I do have one. Christian, you're self-muted. If you want to unmute, you can ask your question. Christian? Oh, sorry. I think I muted her.
You did. It's all right. You are doing great, by the way.
These controls are so sensitive. You know. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Is there I put this in the questions. I'm interested in a list of allowable expenses beyond gifts for teachers. Just overall, I feel like Kendra might have a secret list of what PTAs can spend money on and what they can't.
No, sadly, I have no secret list.
We did do a whole training on this at Virginia PTA this summer. I need to check if it ever got uploaded to YouTube, and we had some technical issues, sadly, this summer with some of our presentations that, Jamie, I know you helped me with that one, but some of them did not get saved properly, and so then they didn't end up on YouTube. Like I know the Bylaws one was one of those, which a lot of people have questions on that form. But I do have a presentation that is not exactly what you're looking for, but pretty close. It is a whole slew of slides where we talk about all the different things you might be asked to fund. So if anybody listening would like to look at a copy of that presentation, you can email me, treasurer@vapta.org. I'll put it in the chat too.
Is that not on the web, are all those training presentations, forgetting about the recording, not on the Virginia PTA website anywhere?
They are not. We had some organizational changes over the summer, and some things got changed. So we did have a file repository of all the presentations, but that is gone. We are working frantically to try to update our website. As I think has been mentioned here, we're all volunteers. There's just not enough time. So, we're trying the best we can to get all of these resources up on the website. But if you email me, I can send you a copy of the presentation, and then we'll work on, trying to get access back to all of those again.
And I wanted to jump into, Anne Marie, that, National PTA does have e-learning, and they do cover extensively about treasurers as well. So, be sure and check what the webinars that might be available through National PTA. You just need to go on and kind of register with your email, and then you can view those free. So we also have Abigail. I'm going to hopefully unmute you.
Really quickly before we move to Abigail's question, I did want to say on this question, I know that Christian had asked about playground equipment, copy machines. One thing that we want to be really careful about is what your insurance covers. So you've got to be reading your insurance, because it may be that your insurance wouldn't allow you to do playground equipment. If it does, then you really need to work through your school and make sure that the facilities group is involved from your school district. The other thing that we've seen a lot of is, PTAs that are flush with cash, buying things that are the responsibility of the school to provide. And we just want to be really careful as PTAs that we are not funding the school with things that the school should be providing. So, things like copy machines, like the school system should be providing that. And so we just want to make sure that although all of our hearts are in the right places, that we're walking that very fine line of being just like a slush fund to the school, and what it is that we're providing and why we're providing it and who it benefits. So I just wanted to throw that out there for consideration. Sorry, Debbie, didn't mean to.
Well, and to follow up on that, you also need to find out, and it's going to be different between Alexandria, Arlington, and Fairfax, what your school district allows. In Arlington, for instance, if you're providing a tangible good, our school district has to accept it, and it becomes the property of the school district. So if a PTA is providing playground equipment, they don't actually own the playground equipment. They give it to the school accepts it as a gift from the PTA, and they're responsible for it. So it's going to vary between school districts as well, some of that. So really work with your school district if on any of those big things. I mean, you're giving a book to the library. No, that's not the same on the same scale. PTA grants, the National PTA often has a lot of different grants. That's one good place to look for grants that PTAs can be eligible for. Also in your local town or county, different initiatives for outdoor learning, for healthy kids, all of those often can be granted to PTAs. Okay, yeah, sorry, Debbie.
That's fine. No, great information. I'm going to ask Abigail if she'd like to ask her question now.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So my questions are rather simple in nature, and this is my first year doing this. So I've got a lot of just stupid questions, I feel like. Anyway, so my first one is reconciliations. I know that we do them monthly, and I've been doing them the last couple months, but I also know somebody needs to be checking them. And the last 2 months I've had the previous treasurer check them to make sure that I'm doing them correctly, but I don't want to continue having her do it. I want to have somebody else do it. But do you guys have a recommended method of tracking each month, somebody other than me, of course, looking at the reconciliation and saying, this looks good, everything matches? Is there like a go-to method for I guess tracking that and taking that forward so that when you do your financial review at the end of the year, like you have proof that it was checked monthly?
Yes, so it should be a non-signatory on the bank account.
Yes.
Generally, everywhere I've ever been, we always use the secretary.
Okay, but how do you track it? Do they just in an email say, nope, looks good, and you just keep those emails? Or
you can do it by email. You could have them, initial and, sign off on the bank statements. I know I use MemberHub, thanks to Anne Marie. That is like the best thing since sliced bread for me, because basically what I do is I email our secretary the bank invoice, the bank statements for the month, and then she has a user ID in MemberHub that she just can do reconciliations, and she checks them off. So that's an easy way to do it. But if you don't have access to QuickBooks or MoneyMinder or something like that, a simple way to do it is send the invoices or the deposits, whatever it is, with your bank statement and have them initial it and send it back to you.
Okay. So you talk about MemberHub, and that's another question for me. So my PTA, we don't use MemberHub. We actually pay yearly for membership toolkit. And I know that seems silly, especially when we get MemberHub for free, but that's not really a bridge I want to cross, like trying to convince them to switch to a different website. That might be something I do sooner rather than later. But going there, so we haven't been using that, but it seems like you guys want us to submit everything via MemberHub. And I've been talking with my president, so I'm trying to figure out if she's using it to send in her required documents. But assuming we don't use it at all, I can't email all these things to you, correct?
Yeah, you can email them to liaison@vapta.org.
Okay.
And I believe, but don't quote me on this, that she actually will upload them, or he, in the back end into MemberHub, because that's what they're using to actually store all of those documents.
Okay. I do want us to use MemberHub. It's free and it's money we don't have to spend every year on the website we are using. But again, that's something that I can't really tackle now. So that'll be something hopefully I can change.
What I would say though is that, you don't have to use MemberHub for all your one-stop shop PTA things right now. What I would encourage for you to do though is to use it even this year just to upload the compliance documents. Using it just for that. This way, if down the road you want to have a conversation about moving over, you at least have some kind of notion around how it works. So absolutely, try it out. It's free, and it's a super way to do things quickly. So that would be my recommendation, and that's what we do at our local PTA. We don't use 100% of MemberHub, but we do just use it for the compliance piece, and that seems to have worked out very well for us.
And can I also add, Jamie, if you get comfortable with using it for the compliance piece and you're still using another way to collect members, there's a very easy way to import your member list into MemberHub. It's literally, you download, it has a template. It's just a CSV spreadsheet. You can copy and paste.
It actually has a download CSV file for your MemberHub account. So it's actually kind of fun.
Yeah. So if you, I'm coming at this from the state perspective. It just makes things so much easier for us. Because otherwise you have to email that Excel file to us of your members, and you have to write a paper check. If you, even if you don't collect your membership dues in MemberHub, if you set up your Stripe account to link to your bank, you can still pay your dues through MemberHub. So there's a lot of things that you could work on yourself without involving everybody else. Take your, I will admit, like, I was in the same place as you a year ago, and then I became a Virginia PTA treasurer, and I had to learn it. And I've gotten my school's PTAs like just one step at a time into using it. And it's not perfect. There's little quirks to it, like everything. But I think once you get used to it, and I say this for everybody, like once you learn it and everybody starts using it, then it just becomes another thing that you know how to do every year.
Now, my last question, we were talking about dues and stuff.
I have someone else who had a question. And
sorry.
We're already 12 minutes over. So do you mind if we skip
Go
over to
ahead.
the next person, and then we can hang on a little bit afterwards, okay?
Okay, yeah, so Jamie has been holding her hand up for a while. Jamie, I have unmuted you if you want to unmute and ask your question. Jamie McHenry.
Okay, I was like, I've been confused all night with the other Jamie. It's rare that I have a sister name in the a call. I did want some clarification. So I am the PTA president for an Arlington PTA elementary school, and we do come, we're a nomad family, so we come from a variety of states, and our last state did not have any caps on donations towards teachers. So I want to make sure that we're in compliance with the, if I understand correctly, Arlington, Virginia, it's $100 per family per year. Is that correct?
Okay, I can address that.
Thank you.
No problem. You're actually talking about two different things here. As a PTA with PTA funds, you are limited to giving people gifts of $25 or less per fiscal year. That has nothing to do with your families.
So I'm wondering more on so not the PTA, we're not that wealthy, not the PTA, but more the family side. So when we're talking teacher appreciation, holidays, etc., what we are encouraging our parents, and the rule is $100. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's, well, I will double check and get back to you, but unless Arlington has changed it, which is always possible, gifts are limited to $100 per named group.
Okay.
So if your room parent collects all the money and gives it in one amount, then the room parent is a named group. If each family wants to do it individually, family A could give $100 and family B could give $100 and family C could give $100. But I can fill you in on that offline.
That would be great. I would love to have an Arlington contact. That would be fantastic. Like I said, we're a nomadic family, and I'm trying to get my Northern Virginia bearings compared to Florida.
Yes. Okay. I'm going to put my email address in the chat, and you can reach out. Feel free to reach out to me directly.
And just to let everyone know, Kendra and Jamie's email address is actually on the slide in front of you. So, which is great, and I'm glad you can connect with your Arlington council. And this is why we've offered this training with our council leaders, because we really want our local units to know who to reach out to as their council representative. And of course, at the district level, we are here to support our councils as well as our local units. But that relationship is really key, since the council and the local units are focused on within your own school district. And as Kendra said, that is a school, I'm supposing a school district policy, not a PTA policy. But we encourage, and there is and Jamie, correct me if I'm wrong, there is a kind of a limit to where no one can personally benefit or profit from PTA membership dues. So,
that's right.
You know, so you have to be very careful when you're using your membership dues to purchase things, or especially for an individual like a teacher or administrator or whatever. No one is supposed to, and even another PTA leader, no one is supposed to personally profit from membership dues. So, but this has been great conversation. Thank you all for joining. And I know if we didn't answer your questions, we've tried to put contacts into both the questions box in the chat. And so Jason, thank you for adding your email there. And Anne Marie, I think you added yours as well. And so I really appreciate everybody's joining us tonight. Jamie and Kendra and Anne Marie, thank you so much for giving such wonderful advice, guidance, support, and resources. So you hit everything. And I have to say, Northern Virginia District PTA, we are just so blessed to have such wonderful, engaged advocates and PTA leaders in our area so that we can provide, meaningful support and guidance to our local PTA leaders. And we are the largest district in the state with 225 PTAs consisting of 3 councils. And so we carry a heavy lift within Virginia, and but we do it with grace and compassion and dedication. So thank you all for taking a leadership role and joining us tonight. And we are always here for you, no matter what the question is. And sometimes, Jamie will agree, no matter what time you ask the question. So we will probably answer you within not too long afterwards. So
Right.
we're kind of PTA junkies, I guess. So anyway, thanks, Jason, for running this session. And if anybody else has any questions, just reach out to us and we'll be here. And we hope you do share this information with your board members who could not be here tonight, because this is what PTA does. We share, and we want you to have strong teams. And the only way you can have a team is if everybody has the same information. So when you get this recording, please share it with your other board members, your other officers, so that everybody can understand what PTA is, what it means, and what your responsibilities are as PTA leaders. So with that, if any of the other organizers have anything they wish to say, please chime in.
We're available. Feel free to reach out to us. As mentioned multiple times, we're volunteers, so if it takes more than a couple of hours to get back to you, it could just be that we're really busy, but we all will get back to you in relatively short order.
Thank you, Kendra. Absolutely. All right, Jason, you have anything you want to say?
No, just have a good evening, everybody.
All right. And we do have another training session on Saturday morning from 10 to noon. And the first session will be at communications, and the social media and communications. And the second one will be programs for our PTAs and for students. So if you have a chance, please register and join us Saturday. Thanks a lot. Good night, guys.